I'm Melissa, 28, from Seattle. What should have been a proud day watching my sister Rebecca graduate college turned into the day my parents publicly announced I was no longer their daughter. Little did they know, I was carrying proof of the devastating family secret they'd kept from me my entire life, one that would explain why I was never enough for them. That afternoon, I finally found the courage to unveil the truth that would change our family forever. Before I tell you how my sister's graduation ceremony turned into the day that changed our family forever, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. And if family drama resonates with you, subscribe to hear more stories of healing and redemption. Growing up in suburban Chicago, we were the picture-perfect American family. At least that's what everyone thought. My father Thomas was a successful attorney at a prestigious law firm, and my mother Diana was a real estate agent known for selling luxury homes. Our Tudor-style house with its manicured lawn hosted countless dinner parties where my parents showcased their social connections and accomplishments. From the outside, we had it all. But inside those walls, a different reality existed. From my earliest memories, I understood that I occupied a different place in my parents' hearts than my younger sister Rebecca did. While only 3 years apart, we might as well have been from different planets in my parents' eyes. Rebecca was the golden child, brilliant from the moment she entered school, athletically gifted and socially magnetic. She brought home straight A's without seeming to try, won swimming competitions at the state level, and was always surrounded by friends. My parents beamed with pride at her every achievement, no matter how small. I was different. Art spoke to me in a way that mathematics and science never did. I spent hours sketching in my room, creating imaginary worlds with coloured pencils and paints. My grades were average, mostly B's with the occasional A in English or art. Not bad, but certainly not the academic excellence my parents expected. "Why can't you focus like your sister?" became a common refrain in our household. My mother would sigh as she reviewed my report card. "Rebecca never gets anything less than an A. She understands the importance of academic excellence." I remember my first art show in 6th grade. I'd created a watercolour landscape that my art teacher had specifically praised. I invited my parents, hoping this might be something they could finally be proud of. They arrived late, glanced briefly at my painting, and spent the remainder of the event pointing out how another child's more technically precise drawing was clearly superior. "That's what real talent looks like," my father commented, not realising how deeply his words cut. "You should take notes if you're serious about this art thing." On the drive home, they discussed Rebecca's upcoming swim meet for 30 minutes straight, never mentioning my artwork again. The pattern continued throughout my teenage years. When I won a creative writing contest in high school, my mother's response was, "That's nice, but colleges care about science competitions. Rebecca's science fair project is going to regionals next week." The only adult who seemed to see me was my Aunt Catherine, my mother's sister. Unlike Diana, Catherine had chosen a creative path as a literature professor. She lived in a small apartment filled with books and art, and visiting her was like entering a sanctuary where my interests were valid and valued. "Your art speaks, Melissa," she told me once, studying a portrait I'd drawn. "You have a unique perspective. Never let anyone convince you that's not valuable." During my junior year of high school, I painted a self-portrait for an advanced art class. The teacher entered it in a citywide competition where it received honourable mention. When the local newspaper featured a small picture of me with my artwork, I was ecstatic. Finally, something my parents couldn't dismiss. I still remember that evening vividly. I placed the newspaper on the kitchen counter where they would see it. My mother glanced at it while preparing dinner. "Oh, you got your picture in the paper," she said flatly. My father picked it up, adjusted his reading glasses and frowned. Interesting style, I suppose. Not really my taste." Before I could respond, Rebecca burst through the door with news of her perfect ACT score. The newspaper was promptly forgotten as my parents erupted in celebration, calling relatives and planning a special dinner out. My moment of recognition vanished completely in the excitement over Rebecca's achievement. What hurt most wasn't the disparity in attention. I'd grown accustomed to that. It was the growing realization that no achievement of mine would ever be enough. The goalposts constantly moved. If I got a B+, they'd ask why it wasn't an A. If I got an A, they'd ask why I couldn't get A's in all subjects like Rebecca. If I won a local art contest, they'd point out it wasn't a national competition. Despite this, I never resented Rebecca herself. She was kind and often seemed uncomfortable with our parents' obvious favoritism. Sometimes she'd try to deflect attention back to me or downplay her achievements when she saw how I was being sidelined. Melissa helped me with the creative parts of my science project. She once volunteered during a family dinner celebrating her latest award. I couldn't have done it without her artistic skills. My parents nodded distractedly before continuing to praise her scientific acumen. Rebecca shot me an apologetic look across the table. As we entered our later teen years, I developed a protective shell. I stopped sharing my achievements and passions with my parents. I created a private world where their approval didn't matter. Art became not just my passion but my refuge, a place where I could express the complicated emotions of being the less favoured child. By senior year, I had developed resilience and determination born from years of emotional neglect. I knew that, whatever path I chose, I would need to walk it largely alone, at least as far as my parents were concerned. What I didn't know then was that there was a reason behind their persistent emotional distance, a secret that would explain everything, though it would take years for me to discover it. When my college acceptance letters arrived, I faced the biggest decision of my young life. I'd applied to several schools with strong art programs, and to my surprise and delight, I was accepted to my dream school, a prestigious art institute in Seattle. The program was perfect for me, focusing on illustration and graphic design, areas where I showed the most promise. My parents' reaction was predictably unenthusiastic. "Art school?" my father scoffed, barely looking up from his newspaper. "And how exactly do you plan to support yourself with an art degree?" "We've already started a college fund for Rebecca," my mother added. "She'll be applying to Northwestern Pre-Med in 3 years. That's a real degree with actual career prospects." That evening, they made it clear that while they would provide minimal financial support for my education, they considered it a waste of money. If I insisted on pursuing this hobby rather than a real education, I would need to find my own way financially. "We simply can't justify spending our savings on something so impractical," my father explained in his lawyer voice, the one he used when delivering unpleasant news to clients. "We need to be practical about the future." What he didn't say, but what I clearly understood, was that their financial resources were being reserved for Rebecca's education. Their investment would be saved for the child they believed would actually succeed. That fall, I moved across the country to Seattle with 2 suitcases and barely enough savings to cover my first semester's books. I'd secured a partial scholarship, but it wasn't nearly enough. Within my first week, I'd found a job as a barista at a coffee shop near campus and picked up weekend shifts at a local art supply store. My schedule was brutal: classes during the day, work until closing, then staying up late to complete assignments. While other students socialised and built networks, I was too busy trying to survive. But despite the exhaustion and constant financial stress, I felt something I'd rarely experienced at home: freedom. In Seattle, nobody compared me to Rebecca. Nobody had preconceived notions about my capabilities or worth. I could define myself on my own terms. During my sophomore year, I met people who would become my chosen family. Daniel, a photography major who worked at the same coffee shop. Tara, a graphic design student who became my roommate when my first housing arrangement fell through. And Jose, a painting major whose technical skills and encouragement pushed me to improve my own technique. They saw value in my work when I doubted myself. They showed up to my exhibitions and celebrated my successes without qualification or comparison. When I received my first A+ on a major project, it was Daniel who took me out for celebratory drinks, not my parents who didn't even return my excited phone call about it. That pattern continued. When my illustration was selected for the cover of the student art magazine, I called home, hoping this tangible success might finally impress them. My mother answered and listened for approximately 30 seconds before interrupting. "That's nice, honey, but Rebecca just got accepted into the honours programme. The youngest student ever selected. We're taking her out to celebrate tonight. Can I call you back sometime next week?" She never did call back. By junior year, phone calls home had dwindled to obligatory holiday check-ins and brief, strained conversations that left me feeling worse than before I'd called. My parents rarely asked about my studies or my life in Seattle. When they did, their questions were cursory, their interest feigned. Meanwhile, I was finding my voice as an artist. My work began exploring themes of belonging, identity, and family, processing my experiences through art in ways I couldn't yet articulate in words. My professors took notice. One of them recommended me for an internship at a small publishing house specializing in illustrated books, which later turned into my first professional job offer. I also began seeing a therapist, something my parents would have dismissed as unnecessary self-indulgence. Through those sessions, I started recognizing the toxic family dynamic I'd grown up with. I learned about concepts like golden child and scapegoat, terms that gave structure to my experiences and helped me understand I wasn't imagining the disparity in treatment. "What you're describing is a common pattern in dysfunctional families," my therapist explained. "It doesn't mean your parents don't love you, but it does suggest they have their own unresolved issues that they're projecting onto their children." It was both painful and liberating to contextualize my childhood experiences. I began to see that my parents' inability to value me wasn't a reflection of my worth, but rather their limitations. By senior year, I had established myself as one of the top illustration students in my program. My senior thesis exhibition drew attention from local galleries and even a few professional illustrators in the Seattle arts community. I'd secured a position at the publishing house upon graduation and had begun building a promising freelance portfolio alongside my day job. My parents did not attend my graduation ceremony, despite my invitation. They sent a card with a modest check enclosed, far less than what they spent on Rebecca's high school graduation gift, and their regrets that they couldn't make the trip due to a conflict with one of my father's work events. I cried that night, not because I missed their presence, but because I realized I had stopped expecting them to show up for me long ago. My chosen family, Daniel, Tara, Jose, and others who had become important in my life, filled the seats where my biological family should have been. They cheered loudly when I crossed the stage, took me to dinner afterward, and celebrated my achievement without reservation. Throughout these years, I maintained a relationship with Rebecca, despite the growing distance between our parents and me. We texted regularly and spoke on the phone every few weeks. She visited me in Seattle during her spring break junior year, and I showed her my world, my apartment, my work, my friends, my favourite parts of the city. Away from our parents' influence, Rebecca confided in me about the pressure she felt to live up to their expectations. "Sometimes I'm not even sure if medicine is what I want," she admitted one night as we sat in my small apartment. "I just know it's what they've always expected from me. The golden child, the perfect daughter." She looked at me with tired eyes. "You're the brave one, Melissa. You actually chose your own path." I hugged her that night, both of us understanding that we were casualties of different sides of the same dysfunctional dynamic, me dismissed and overlooked, her smothered by impossible expectations. What neither of us knew then was that there was a reason behind our parents' dramatically different treatment of us, a secret that would shake the foundations of our family and redefine everything I thought I knew about my place in it. 3 years after college graduation, I had established a comfortable life in Seattle. My illustration career was taking off. I'd published 2 children's books with a respected publishing house and was developing a reputation for my distinctive style. My apartment, though small, was filled with art, books, and the warmth of a space that was entirely mine. Despite the growing distance between my parents and me, I still made obligatory trips home for major holidays, more for Rebecca's sake than anything else. That December, I reluctantly boarded a flight to Chicago for Christmas, steeling myself for the usual cold reception and subtle digs about my career choice. The first 2 days followed the familiar pattern. My mother fussed over Rebecca, now in her final year of pre-med studies, while my father asked perfunctory questions about my drawing hobby before steering conversations back to Rebecca's accomplishments and medical school applications. On Christmas Eve, After an uncomfortable dinner where my recent illustration award was acknowledged with cursory congratulations before 20 minutes of discussion about Rebecca's research project, I volunteered to clean up the kitchen while everyone else retired to the living room for coffee. Later that night, unable to sleep in my childhood bedroom that remained unchanged since high school, unlike Rebecca's room, which had been updated with new furniture and decor, I decided to wrap the few presents I'd brought. Realising I needed tape, I quietly made my way to my father's home office where household supplies were kept. The house was silent except for the gentle hum of the heating system. I opened the office door slowly to avoid its characteristic squeak and slipped inside. As I searched through desk drawers for tape, I heard raised voices coming from my parents' bedroom across the hall, unusual, as they rarely argued openly. "She doesn't need to know, Thomas. We agreed years ago." My mother's voice was tense but hushed. "It's been nearly 30 years, Diana. Don't you think this charade has gone on long enough?" My father sounded weary. "And what good would it do now? It would only create unnecessary drama. Rebecca doesn't need that distraction during medical school applications." Their voices faded as they moved deeper into their bedroom. Curiosity piqued. I continued searching for tape, opening the bottom drawer of my father's desk. Instead of office supplies, I found a folder labelled Family Documents. I shouldn't have opened it. Some part of me knew that. But something in their conversation had triggered an instinct, a feeling that whatever they were discussing somehow involved me. Inside the folder were birth certificates, insurance policies, and at the bottom, a thick envelope with my name written on it. My hands trembled slightly as I opened it, removing several official-looking documents. The first was a birth certificate, not the one I'd seen before that listed Thomas and Diana as my parents, but an original showing different names. The mother listed was Jennifer Lawson. The father was unknown. Beneath that was a legal document, adoption, papers with my parents' signatures and a court seal. According to the date, I had been adopted as an infant just days after my birth. The room seemed to spin around me. I was adopted. How was this possible? Why had they never told me? More documents revealed the truth. Jennifer Lawson had been my mother's cousin. She had died during childbirth, and Thomas and Diana had adopted me, her orphaned newborn. There was no mention of my biological father. I don't know how long I sat there on the office floor, documents spread around me, trying to process this revelation. Every memory of my childhood suddenly shifted, recontextualized through this new lens. The emotional distance, the constant comparison to Rebecca, the subtle but persistent feeling of being an outsider in my own family. It all made a terrible kind of sense now. The office door opened, flooding the dark room with light from the hallway. My father stood there, his expression shifting from surprise to alarm as he registered what I was holding. "Melissa," he began, but I cut him off. "I'm adopted. My..." Voice sounded strange to my own ears, hollow and distant. "Were you ever going to tell me?" My mother appeared behind him, her face paling as she took in the scene. "You had no right to go through private documents," she said, but the accusation sounded weak even to her. "No right?" I stood up, adoption papers clutched in my hand. "I had no right to know my own identity, to know who my biological mother was." They ushered me out of the office and into the living room, closing doors to avoid waking Rebecca. What followed was a conversation that destroyed any remaining illusions I had about my place in their family. "We took you in when no one else would," my mother explained in a clinical tone, as though discussing a business arrangement rather than a child's life. Jennifer was young, unmarried. There was no father in the picture. We felt obligated to help when she died. "Obligated," I repeated, the word cutting like glass. "Not wanted, obligated." My father at least had the decency to look uncomfortable. "It was complicated, Melissa. We weren't planning to have children yet. Diana's career was taking off. Then suddenly we had a newborn to care for." "And you never thought I deserved to know?" I asked, tears finally breaking through my shock. "My entire life has been a lie." "We did what we thought was best," my mother insisted. "What good would it have done for you to know you were different? We raised you as our own." Did you? I challenged, years of emotional neglect crystallizing into clarity. Because I never felt like your own. Now I understand why. They exchanged a glance I couldn't interpret before my father spoke again. Rebecca doesn't know. We decided it would be better that way. Better for whom? I demanded. For everyone. My mother said firmly, and we expect you to respect our decision on this. Rebecca doesn't need to be burdened with this information, especially not now when she's applying to medical schools. This stays between us. I stared at them, truly seeing them perhaps for the first time. You're not concerned about protecting Rebecca, you're protecting yourselves. You don't want her to know that you've treated your adopted daughter differently her entire life. My father's expression hardened. If you tell Rebecca or anyone else about this, you'll no longer be welcome in this house. We've provided for you, given you opportunities. Opportunities. I laughed bitterly. You refuse to help with my college education. You've dismissed my career at every turn. Meanwhile, you've saved every penny for Rebecca's future. We made the best choices we could, my mother said coldly. If you want to remain part of this family, you'll respect our wishes on this matter. In that moment, something broke inside me. But something else, something stronger, began to form in its place. Without another word, I returned to my room, packed my suitcase, and booked the first flight back to Seattle for the following morning. I left before anyone else was awake, leaving only a brief note saying I needed time. Back in Seattle, I fell apart in the privacy of my apartment. For weeks, I barely functioned, taking time off work and seeing my therapist twice weekly to process the magnitude of this betrayal. Not only had my parents hidden my true identity from me for 25 years, but they had also made it clear that their conditional love came with the price of my silence and compliance. I didn't hear from them for nearly 2 months after I left. When my mother finally called, it was as though nothing had happened. She asked about my work with forced politeness and mentioned they were helping Rebecca prepare medical school applications. She didn't acknowledge our Christmas Eve confrontation or ask how I was coping with the revelation that had shattered my sense of identity. The message was clear. The subject was closed. To remain in their lives, I would need to pretend along with them, burying the truth just as they had done for 25 years. But I wasn't sure I could do that anymore, or if I even wanted to. The months following my discovery were some of the most difficult of my life. My sense of identity, already fragile from years of emotional neglect, had been completely upended. Who was I, if not the person I'd believed myself to be for 28 years? My therapist helped me work through the layers of betrayal, anger, and grief. What you're experiencing is a form of identity disruption, she explained. Finding out you're adopted later in life can trigger a profound crisis, especially when it comes with the realization that you've been deliberately deceived by those you trusted most. I obsessed over the few details I had about Jennifer Lawson, my biological mother. I knew only that she was my mother's cousin and had died giving birth to me. I had no photos, no letters, no keepsakes, nothing to connect me to the woman who had brought me into the world. After several weeks of isolation, I reached out to the one person who might have more information, Aunt Catherine. Though she was my mother's sister, she had always shown me a kindness and understanding that my parents lacked. If anyone would tell me the truth, it would be her. We met at a cafe during her visit to Seattle for an academic conference. When I told her I knew about my adoption, she didn't seem surprised. "I've always thought you should have been told," she said, reaching across the table to squeeze my hand. I disagreed with Diana and Thomas's decision to keep it from you, but it wasn't my place to go against their wishes as your parents. Unlike my parents' clinical explanation, Catherine offered a more compassionate version of events. Jennifer had been young, just 21, and studying art in college when she became pregnant. The father was a fellow art student who left when he learned about the pregnancy. Jennifer had planned to raise me on her own, but developed complications in her 3rd trimester. She was so excited about becoming a mother, Catherine told me, her eyes soft with the memory. She painted the most beautiful nursery in her small apartment, Clouds and stars on the ceiling, woodland creatures on the walls. She used to talk to you all the time while she painted, telling you about all the art she would show you, all the museums you would visit together. I cried then, mourning the mother I never knew and the life we might have shared, a life where my artistic nature would have been celebrated rather than tolerated. Catherine had more to share, and what she revealed next changed everything. Jennifer came from money. Her parents, your biological grandparents, had been quite wealthy. When she died, she left behind a substantial trust fund that was meant for your care and education. My breath caught. A trust fund? Catherine nodded grimly. Thomas and Diana became the trustees when they adopted you. The condition was that they raise you as their own and use the money for your upbringing and education. The implications were staggering. They told me they couldn't afford to help with my art school tuition. They said they were saving for Rebecca's education. I suspected as much, Catherine sighed. I confronted Diana about it once when you were in high school. She claimed they were investing the money for your future, but I never believed that explanation. Armed with this new information, I hired a lawyer who specialized in trust law. After some investigation, we discovered the devastating truth. My parents had systematically misappropriated funds from my trust over the years. They had used Jennifer's money intended specifically for my care and education, to fund their lifestyle, home renovations, and yes, Rebecca's college fund. The betrayal cut deeper than I could have imagined. Not only had they hidden my true identity and treated me as less than their biological daughter, but they had also literally stolen my inheritance, money that my biological mother had left to ensure I would be cared for. My lawyer assured me we had a strong case for financial recovery, but pursuing it would mean publicly exposing my parents' deception and likely severing any remaining family ties. I needed time to decide what to do. During this period of deliberation, Rebecca called with exciting news. She was graduating with honours from Northwestern and had been selected as valedictorian. She wanted me to attend the ceremony in June. It would mean so much to have you there, Mel, she said, using her childhood nickname for me. I know things have been weird with Mum and Dad, but this is important to me. I hadn't told Rebecca about my discovery. Despite my parents' betrayal, I wasn't sure it was my place to disrupt her relationship with them or her understanding of our family. She was innocent in all this, and I loved her despite everything. For weeks I agonized over whether to attend the graduation. My friends were divided in their advice. They don't deserve to have you there after what they did, Daniel argued, passionately. But Rebecca does, Tara countered. She's always been good to you. This isn't about them, it's about supporting your sister. In the end, it was a painting that helped me decide. I'd been working on a series about identity and family secrets, processing my emotions through art as I always had. One night, looking at a canvas depicting a fractured family photo, I realised that continuing to hide the truth was allowing my parents' deception to persist. As long as I remained silent, I was participating in the lie. I decided to attend Rebecca's graduation, but not to maintain the facade any longer. I would bring copies of the adoption papers and trust documents. I didn't know exactly when or how I would reveal the truth, but I knew I couldn't continue living in secrecy. The night before my flight to Chicago, I carefully packed the documents, along with a small photo album Catherine had given me, containing pictures of Jennifer, my first glimpse of the mother I'd never known. Looking at her face, I saw echoes of my own features, the same high cheekbones, the same slightly asymmetrical smile, the same artistic temperament evident in the paintings visible in the background of several photos. As I boarded the plane, the next morning, I felt a strange calm settle over me. For the first time in months, I knew exactly what I needed to do. The truth, however painful, was better than a lifetime of lies and pretense. Whatever happened at Rebecca's graduation, it would be the beginning of something authentic, even if it meant the end of the family I had known. The flight to Chicago stretched before me, each mile bringing me closer to a confrontation that would change everything. I spent those hours rehearsing what I might say, preparing for my parents' reactions, and steeling myself for the possibility that I might lose Rebecca too, when she learned how our parents had deceived us both all these years. But beneath the Anxiety and uncertainty. I felt something else stirring, a sense of impending liberation. The truth, long buried, was about to be brought into the light. Whatever came after would at least be real. The Northwestern University campus was resplendent that June morning. Sunlight glinted off the Gothic architecture, and Lake Michigan sparkled in the distance. Graduates in purple robes streamed across the neatly manicured lawns, their faces bright with accomplishment and anticipation. Under different circumstances, it would have been a perfect day. I arrived at the main quad early, my stomach knotted with tension. The documents felt heavy in my bag, like stones weighing me down. I had texted Rebecca that morning to let her know I had arrived safely in Chicago, and she had responded with excited emojis and promises to find me after the ceremony. I spotted my parents from a distance. They stood near the entrance to the auditorium, my father in an expensive suit, my mother in a tailored dress and pearls, the picture of upper-middle-class success. They were chatting with another couple, laughing politely at something the man had said. They hadn't seen me yet. For a moment I considered turning around, flying back to Seattle and leaving the past buried. But the weight of the documents in my bag reminded me of all the years of lies, all the casual cruelty disguised as parenting, all the money that should have supported my dreams, but instead had been diverted elsewhere. I approached them slowly. My mother noticed me first, her smile faltering for just a moment before she composed herself. "Melissa," she said, her voice carrying the same distant politeness she might use with a casual acquaintance. "You made it." My father nodded in acknowledgement, but didn't move to embrace me. The couple they had been speaking with looked between us curiously, sensing the tension. "John, Margaret, this is our daughter, Melissa," my mother said, the slight pause before daughter, subtle but unmistakable. "She lives in Seattle. She's an illustrator." The way she said illustrator carried the same tone she might use for unemployed or convicted felon. John and Margaret murmured polite greetings, but the awkwardness was palpable. "We should find our seats," my father announced, effectively ending the interaction. "The ceremony will be starting soon." We made our way into the auditorium, my parents walking slightly ahead of me, maintaining physical distance that mirrored the emotional gulf between us. They had saved me a seat in the family section, though I noticed it was on the aisle, separated from them by an empty chair presumably for Rebecca after she had processed in with her classmates. The ceremony itself was a blur of speeches, music, and the reading of hundreds of names. I applauded mechanically, my mind elsewhere, rehearsing and discarding different versions of what I might say when the moment came. Only when Rebecca's name was called did I snap back to full awareness. "Rebecca Elizabeth Winters, summa cum laude, valedictorian," the dean announced. My parents practically vibrated with pride as Rebecca crossed the stage to receive her diploma. Despite everything, I felt a surge of genuine happiness for her. She had worked hard for this moment, and regardless of our parents' toxic dynamics, her accomplishments were real and deserved celebration. When it was time for the valedictorian speech, Rebecca approached the podium with confidence. Her address was eloquent and thoughtful, touching on themes of perseverance, intellectual curiosity, and the responsibility that comes with privilege. Near the end, she said something that caught me by surprise. "Success isn't measured only by degrees or accolades," she said, her voice clear in the hushed auditorium. "It's also about having the courage to pursue your authentic path, even when that path isn't the one others expect you to take. My sister taught me that." Her eyes found mine in the audience, and she smiled. "Thank you, Melissa, for showing me what courage looks like." My parents shifted uncomfortably beside me. This wasn't part of the narrative they had constructed. The successful daughter and the disappointing one. Rebecca had just publicly acknowledged me as an inspiration rather than a cautionary tale. After the ceremony, families gathered on the lawn for photographs and congratulations. Rebecca found us quickly, still in her graduation robes, her face flushed with excitement. "You came!" she exclaimed, hugging me tightly. "Thank you so much, and thank you for what you said in your speech," I whispered back. "It meant everything." Our parents quickly inserted themselves into the moment, my father putting his arm around Rebecca's shoulders possessively. "We need to get some photos," my mother announced, already gesturing to a friend with a professional-looking camera. "Rebecca, stand here between us." I stepped back, understanding I wasn't included in the us. This wasn't new. I had been excluded from family photos many times before, always with some excuse about just getting one of the three of you first, before somehow never getting around to including me. As they posed, smiling broadly, other families mingled around us. Several of my parents' friends approached to congratulate Rebecca, and my parents introduced them proudly. "Our daughter, the doctor-to-be," my father boasted to a distinguished-looking man I recognised as his law partner, "accepted to Johns Hopkins Medical School for the fall." "You must be very proud," the man replied, then glanced in my direction. "And you have another daughter as well, isn't that right?" My mother's smile tightened almost imperceptibly. "Rebecca is our focus today," she said smoothly, avoiding a direct answer. But the man persisted, turning toward me with genuine interest. "And what do you do, young lady?" Before I could answer, my father cut in. "Melissa lives in Seattle. She's pursuing her own interests." The way he said it made it sound like I was an aimless drifter rather than a professional with a successful career. "I'm an illustrator," I said directly to the man. "I've published 2 children's books and work with several major publishing houses." The man looked impressed. "That's wonderful. My granddaughter loves illustrated books. What are the titles?" "I'd love to get them for her." As I began to tell him about my work, another friend of my parents joined the conversation, a woman who apparently kept up with the art scene. "Melissa Winters?" she asked, her eyes widening. "Not the Melissa Winters who did the illustrations for The Moonlight Garden. My daughter's an editor at Rivers Publishing, and she mentioned that book. The artwork is extraordinary." I nodded, surprised and pleased at the recognition. "Yes, that's me." "Well, you're making quite a name for yourself," she said enthusiastically. "Your parents must be so proud to have 2 such accomplished daughters." There was an uncomfortable silence. My parents exchanged a glance loaded with meaning before my mother spoke in a carefully measured tone. "Actually, Melissa isn't really our daughter anymore," she said, her voice just loud enough for several nearby people to hear. "She's chosen a different path that's incompatible with our family values." The woman looked confused. "I don't understand." "What Diana means," my father interjected smoothly, "is that families sometimes grow apart. Melissa has decided to pursue her own life, separate from our family, and we've had to respect that decision, painful though it may be." I stood frozen, unable to believe what I was hearing. They were publicly disowning me, creating a narrative where I had abandoned the family rather than the other way around. "Rebecca is our only daughter now," my mother added with finality, putting an arm around Rebecca's shoulders. "And we couldn't be prouder of her." Rebecca looked horrified, her celebration suddenly overshadowed by this unexpected declaration. "Mum, what are you saying?" she whispered urgently. But my parents had already turned away, steering her toward another group of friends, leaving me standing alone with the confused woman and several other witnesses to my public humiliation. The immediate pain was sharp and disorienting, like a physical blow. But as I stood there watching them walk away, something unexpected happened. The pain began to transform into a strange, calm clarity. This moment, this public rejection, had freed me from any remaining obligation to protect their secret. They had made their choice, and now I would make mine. I looked down at my bag, feeling the weight of the documents inside. The moment had come, sooner than I had expected, but perhaps exactly when it needed to. Taking a deep breath, I started, walking toward the restaurant where I knew the family celebration lunch was scheduled to take place. The Lakeside Grill was one of Chicago's upscale restaurants, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Lake Michigan and white tablecloths that practically glowed in the midday sun. My parents had reserved a private dining area, no doubt to impress their friends and colleagues with their generosity in celebrating Rebecca's achievement. I arrived shortly after they did, slipping into the room quietly as waitstaff circulated with champagne and appetizers. Rebecca noticed me immediately, relief washing over her face as she broke away from a conversation to approach me. "Melissa, I'm so sorry about what happened out there," she whispered urgently. "I had no idea they were going to say those things. I don't understand what's going on." "It's okay," I assured her, though nothing was okay. "This isn't your fault." "But what did they mean? Why would they say you're not part of the family anymore?" Before I could respond, my mother appeared at Rebecca's elbow. "Darling, the Andersons want to congratulate you," she said, pointedly ignoring my presence. "They're very interested in hearing about your research." Rebecca hesitated, clearly torn. "I'll be right there. I'm talking to Melissa right now." My mother's smile tightened. "The Andersons are leaving soon, and Dr. Anderson might be a valuable contact for your Johns Hopkins rotation. Family discussions can wait." The irony of her emphasizing family discussions while simultaneously denying I was family wasn't lost on me. Rebecca shot me an apologetic look before allowing herself to be steered away. I found a seat at the far end of the table, away from my parents but with a clear view of the entire room. The weight of the documents in my bag seemed to grow heavier with each passing minute. As lunch was served, conversations flowed around me, none directed at me. I was effectively invisible, present physically but erased socially. Midway through the main course, my father stood tapping his glass with a spoon to call for attention. The room quieted as everyone turned toward him expectantly. "I want to propose a toast," he announced, his voice carrying the practiced projection of a courtroom attorney. "To Rebecca, our daughter, who has exceeded every expectation we ever had." Glasses raised around the room as he continued. "From the moment she was born, we knew Rebecca was special. Her intelligence, her determination, her character, all extraordinary. And now, as she prepares to enter Johns Hopkins Medical School, we couldn't be prouder of the young woman she has become." My mother stood to join him, her eyes glistening with what looked like genuine tears. "To our daughter," she added, "who has never disappointed us." "To Rebecca," chorused the assembled guests, raising their glasses higher. As the toast concluded and people began to sip their champagne, I found myself standing. I hadn't planned to speak, but something about their carefully constructed narrative, the perfect parents, the perfect daughter, demanded a response. "I'd like to say something too," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. The room fell silent again, faces turning toward me with varying degrees of surprise and curiosity. My parents exchanged alarmed glances. "I'd also like to congratulate my sister," I began, looking directly at Rebecca. "Your accomplishments are your own, earned through hard work and dedication. No one can take that away from you, and you deserve every success that comes your way." Rebecca smiled at me gratefully, but my parents were already attempting to regain control of the situation. "Thank you, Melissa," my father said dismissively. "Now, about the dessert." "I'm not finished," I interrupted, something I had rarely dared to do growing up. "There's something else I need to say, something everyone here should know." "This is hardly the time or place," my mother hissed, her social smile strained to breaking point. "Actually, I think it's exactly the right time and place," I replied, calmly. "Since you've made it clear to everyone that I'm no longer your daughter, I think they deserve to know why." The tension in the room was palpable. Rebecca looked confused, glancing between me and our parents. "Melissa, what are you talking about?" she asked. I took a deep breath and opened my bag, removing the folder of documents I had brought with me. 3 years ago, I discovered something our parents have kept hidden my entire life. I looked directly at my sister. "Rebecca, I'm adopted." Gasps and murmurs rippled through the room. Rebecca's face registered shock, her eyes widening as she turned to our parents for confirmation or denial. "That's enough," my father said sharply, his lawyer voice now in full effect. "This is a private family matter that has no place at this celebration." But it does, I countered, removing the original birth certificate from the folder. Because it explains everything about our family dynamic. It explains why I was never good enough, why my accomplishments were always dismissed, why my education wasn't worth investing in while Rebecca's was. "Melissa, please!" my mother pleaded, her social facade crumbling as she realised she was losing control of the narrative she had carefully constructed for decades. I continued, my voice growing stronger. My biological mother was Jennifer Lawson, Mum's cousin. She died giving birth to me, and you adopted me, not out of love or compassion, but out of obligation. Rebecca had gone pale, her graduation celebration forgotten as she processed this revelation. "Is this true?" she asked our parents. "Is Melissa adopted?" Neither of them answered directly, which was answer enough. "But there's more," I said, pulling out the trust documents my lawyer had obtained. "Jennifer left a substantial trust fund specifically for my care and education, money that was legally mine, money that our parents misappropriated over the years." My father stepped toward me, his face contorted with rage. "You have no idea." "What you're talking about. Those documents are private." "They're actually about me, so they're very much my business," I replied. "And according to my lawyer, what you did with that money constitutes fraud and breach of fiduciary duty." The stunned silence in the room was deafening. Family, friends, and colleagues who had gathered to celebrate Rebecca's graduation were now unwilling witnesses to the unravelling of the Winters family mythology. "You used Jennifer's money meant for my care and education, to fund your lifestyle and Rebecca's education while telling me you couldn't afford to help with my art school tuition," I continued, laying the documents on the table. "You made me work multiple jobs to put myself through college, while you had hundreds of thousands of dollars that legally belonged to me." Rebecca stood up suddenly, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. "How could you do this?" she demanded, looking at our parents with newfound disillusionment. "How could you lie to both of us our entire lives?" "We did what we thought was best," my mother insisted, her voice shaking. "We gave Melissa a good home, opportunities." "Opportunities?" I laughed without humour. "You systematically undermined my confidence, dismissed my talents, and stole my inheritance. Those aren't opportunities. Those are crimes." My father's face had turned an alarming shade of red. "This is slander," he sputtered, lawyer mode fully engaged. "I won't stand here and listen to these accusations." "They're not accusations. They're facts," I said, pushing the documents toward Rebecca. "It's all here. The adoption papers, the trust documents, the financial records showing how they diverted the money. Everything." Rebecca began looking through the papers, her hands trembling slightly. Our parents watched in horror as their carefully constructed facade crumbled completely. "You told me the money for my education came from your savings," Rebecca said quietly, looking up from the documents. "You told me you couldn't help Melissa because you were saving for my medical school, but it was her money all along, wasn't it?" My mother made a last desperate attempt to regain control. "Rebecca, darling, you have to understand. We wanted to give you the best opportunities." "By stealing from Melissa?" Rebecca's voice rose in anger. "Treating her like she wasn't really your daughter while pretending to everyone else that you were one big happy family." "You don't understand what it was like," my father suddenly shouted, abandoning all pretense of calm. "We never wanted to adopt her. We were forced into it by family obligation. Then we were stuck raising someone else's child while managing our own careers, our own lives." The raw truth, finally spoken aloud, hung in the air like poison. Several guests gasped audibly. Others looked away in embarrassment. Rebecca stared at our father in horror. "She was a baby," she whispered, "an orphaned baby who needed a home. How could you resent a baby?" My mother was crying now, mascara streaking down her carefully made-up face. "You don't understand what it's like to suddenly have responsibility for a child you never planned for, never wanted." "Stop talking," Rebecca cut her off, her voice ice-cold. "Every word you say is making this worse." The restaurant manager appeared at the entrance to our private dining area, clearly uncomfortable. Excuse me, but we've received complaints about the noise level. I'm going to have to ask you to keep it down or take this discussion elsewhere. My father, ever concerned with appearances, immediately tried to smooth things over. I apologise for the disturbance. We're just having a spirited family discussion. It won't happen again. But it was too late. The damage was done. The truth I had carried for 3 years was now out in the open, witnessed not only by Rebecca, but by their entire social circle. There would be no going back to pretending, no more maintaining the fiction of the perfect family with the golden child and the disappointment. In the ensuing chaos, as my parents attempted damage control with their friends while simultaneously trying to contain the fallout from my revelations, Rebecca gathered her purse and graduation cap and came to stand beside me. "Let's get out of here," she said quietly. "I can't be in the same room with them right now." Without another word to our parents, we walked out of the restaurant together, leaving behind the ruins of the family narrative that had shaped both our lives in such profoundly different ways. Rebecca and I found ourselves in a small coffee shop, several blocks from the restaurant, the chaos of the graduation celebration left far behind. We sat across from each other in a quiet corner booth, her graduation cap placed on the seat beside. Her 2 untouched cups of coffee growing cold between us. For several minutes neither of us spoke. The weight of everything that had just happened, the public disowning, the revelation of my adoption, the exposure of our parents' financial fraud, seemed too enormous to address with mere words. Rebecca broke the silence first. "I don't even know what to say," she admitted, her voice small and uncharacteristically uncertain. "I feel like my entire life has been built on lies." "I know exactly how that feels," I replied gently. "I've been processing it for 3 years, and I'm still trying to make sense of it all." "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" There was no accusation in her question, only genuine curiosity. I sighed, tracing the rim of my coffee cup with my finger. "At first, they threatened to cut me off completely if I told anyone, especially you. And then, I don't know. I guess I wasn't sure how it would affect your relationship with them. They're still your biological parents, and I didn't want to destroy that." "They did a pretty good job of destroying it themselves today," Rebecca said with unexpected bitterness. "Publicly announcing you weren't their daughter anymore, and then admitting they never wanted you in the first place. Who does that?" She reached across the table and took my hand. "I'm so sorry, Melissa. I had no idea they treated you that way. Because you were adopted. All those years growing up, I knew they favoured me, but I never understood why. I thought maybe it was because I was younger, or because I was interested in the things they valued. I never imagined—" Her voice trailed off, tears welling in her eyes. "It's not your fault," I assured her, squeezing her hand. "You were a child too. We were both victims of their dysfunction, just in different ways. We spent hours in that coffee shop, talking more openly than we ever had before. Rebecca shared how suffocating it had been to be the golden child, constantly pressured to achieve perfection, never allowed to explore her own interests or make mistakes. I told her about my journey since discovering the truth, the therapy, the legal consultation, the slow process of reclaiming my identity. "What will you do now?" I asked eventually. "About medical school?" Rebecca looked down at her graduation cap, the tassel hanging limply over the edge of the seat. "I don't know. I've been questioning whether medicine is really my passion or just what they programmed me to want. I've been thinking about taking a gap year, actually, figuring out who I am outside of their expectations." "That sounds like a healthy plan," I said. "Take some time to decompress and rediscover yourself." "What about you?" she asked. "Will you pursue legal action about the trust fund?" I had been considering this question for months. "I think I have to," I said finally. "Not just for the money, though that's rightfully mine, but because they need to face consequences for what they did. They've spent a lifetime avoiding accountability, and it's time that changed." The weeks following Rebecca's graduation were chaotic and difficult. Our parents attempted damage control in various ways, First angry phone calls demanding we retract the false accusations, then tearful pleas for understanding. And finally, when those approaches failed, legal threats delivered by my father's colleagues. But they underestimated both my determination and the thorough documentation my lawyer had compiled. The trust documents were clear, and the financial records showed a decades-long pattern of misappropriation. When faced with the possibility of criminal charges and public scandal, they eventually agreed to a settlement that restored the remaining funds to me and included compensation for the money they had already spent. Meanwhile, Rebecca surprised everyone by declining her acceptance to Johns Hopkins and announcing she was moving to Seattle temporarily. "I need space from them, and I want to get to know my sister properly," she explained when I picked her up at the airport, a week after she had made her decision. Living together was an adjustment for both of us. We had spent our childhood in the same house, but separated by the roles our parents had assigned us. Now, sharing my small apartment, we were discovering each other as adults, equals, friends, and true sisters for perhaps the first time. Rebecca found work at a local medical research facility, a position that allowed her to explore her interest in medicine without the pressure of medical school. I continued my illustration work, finding that the resolution of the family secret had somehow freed my creativity in unexpected ways. "Your new work is different," my publisher commented during a review meeting. "There's a depth and authenticity to it that's really compelling. Whatever you're doing, keep doing it." What I was doing was healing. Through art, through therapy, through honest conversations with Rebecca, through building a life based on truth rather than secrets and lies. 6 months after the graduation confrontation, I held my first major solo exhibition at a respected Seattle gallery. The collection, titled Hidden Origins, explored themes of identity, family secrets, and the journey to authenticity. The centerpiece was a large portrait of Jennifer, my biological mother, created from the few photographs Aunt Catherine had provided and my own imagination. Rebecca stood beside me at the opening, her arm linked through mine as we surveyed the crowded gallery. "She would be so proud of you," she said softly, looking at Jennifer's portrait. "Not just for your talent, but for your courage in facing the truth." Our parents did not attend the exhibition, of course. Our relationship with them remained fractured, perhaps irreparably so. But in their absence, we had built something new and precious, a sibling bond based on mutual respect, honesty, and genuine affection, rather than competition and comparison. A year after Rebecca's graduation, we established the Jennifer Lawson Memorial Scholarship for young artists facing financial hardship. Using a portion of the recovered trust fund, we created an opportunity for talented students to pursue their artistic education without the financial struggles I had faced. It felt like the perfect way to honor the mother I had never known, while ensuring her legacy would help others following a similar path. The healing wasn't linear or simple. There were still days when the pain of my parents' rejection and lifetime of emotional neglect felt overwhelming. There were nights when I woke from dreams in which I was still trying desperately to earn their approval. But those moments became less frequent and less intense as time passed. What replaced them was a growing sense of peace and self-acceptance. I was Melissa Winters, born to Jennifer Lawson, raised by Thomas and Diana Winters, sister to Rebecca, artist, survivor, and thriver. My identity was no longer defined by secrets or lies, but by the truth I had fought to uncover and the authentic life I was building day by day. Rebecca eventually returned to her medical studies, but with a different perspective and at a different school, one she had chosen for herself rather than to please our parents. We remained close, visiting each other regularly and supporting each other's journeys with the fierce loyalty that had somehow survived and even flourished despite our parents' attempts to divide us. The most profound lesson from this painful chapter of our lives was that family isn't defined by blood or legal documents. It's created through love, respect, and acceptance, qualities our parents had failed to demonstrate, but that Rebecca and I were learning to embody in our relationship with each other and our chosen families. So if you're struggling with family, secrets, or conditional love, know that you're not alone. The road to truth isn't easy, but it leads to a freedom that's worth every difficult step. And sometimes, The family you build is more meaningful than the one you were born or adopted into. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this story in the comments. Have you ever discovered a family secret that changed your perspective? How did you handle it? And if this story resonated with you, please consider subscribing and sharing it with someone who might need to hear that they're not alone in their family struggles. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember, your worth isn't determined by others' ability to see it. It's inherent, unchangeable, and completely yours.